There are moments in football that nobody plans for, moments that don't show up in the pre-tournament previews, don't get discussed in the tactical breakdowns, and don't appear on any analyst's radar. Moments that just happen, quietly and suddenly, and then echo around the world before anyone has time to process what they've just witnessed. June 15, 2026, Atlanta Stadium, Spain versus Cape Verde, Group H of the FIFA World Cup. On paper, it was supposed to be one of the most predictable matches of the tournament. Spain, one of the favorites to win the whole competition, ranked second in the world, packed with Champions League winners, Ballon d'Or contenders, and players whose individual transfer fees exceed the entire GDP of their opponents. And on the other side, Cape Verde, a nation of around 525,000 people scattered across a group of volcanic islands in the Atlantic Ocean, playing in their very first World Cup match in history. Nobody outside of those islands expected anything from this game. Nobody gave Cape Verde a chance. The expected goals model going into the match gave Spain 2.29 xG, Cape Verde just 0.28. But here's the thing about football. That's exactly why they play the match. So what's really happening here? Let's understand who Cape Verde actually is, because without that context, what happened in Atlanta doesn't make complete sense. Cape Verde, officially known as Cabo Verde, is an archipelago of 10 islands sitting roughly 570 kilometers off the west coast of Africa. Football is everything to this country. It's been everything for generations, and for years, Cape Verde had been one of African football's most consistent overachievers, qualifying regularly for the Africa Cup of Nations and building a reputation as a team that punches far above its weight. But the World Cup was always out of reach. With only 32 teams in the tournament, the margins in African qualifying were brutal, and Cape Verde kept falling just short. That's exactly why the expansion to 48 teams matters to nations like this one. It wasn't just a format change, it was a door opening for the first time in history. Cape Verde qualified by beating Eswatini 3-0 in October 2025, confirming their spot at football's biggest stage. And when the draw was made, they got Spain in their opening match. No warm-up, no gentle introduction to the World Cup, straight into one of the tournament favorites. And standing between Spain and that opening win, in goal for Cape Verde, was a 40-year-old man from the island of São Vicente who had spent his entire career playing in places the football world barely notices: Angola, Moldova, Portugal's second division, Cyprus, Slovakia. A journeyman, a survivor. A man who, just 2 weeks before this match, had his contract expire at Chaves, a second-tier Portuguese club. His name is Josimar Joseph Évora Dias. The world would come to know him by something much simpler: Vozinha. Here's where things get interesting. The name Vozinha means little voice in Cape Verdean Creole. It was given to him by his grandparents, who raised him from childhood. And that detail, seemingly small, is actually the emotional center of the entire story. Vozinha was born in Mindelo on June 3, 1986, making him 40 years and 12 days old when he walked out at Atlanta Stadium. He was named after Josimar, a Brazilian fullback who became famous at the 1986 World Cup in Mexico, the same tournament where Maradona delivered the hand of God and the goal of the century. His parents had originally wanted to name him Valdano, after the Argentine striker, but Cape Verde authorities didn't permit it, so Josimar it was. Named after a player from a tournament that 40 years later, their son would finally reach himself. He didn't become a professional footballer until he was 25. Think about what that means. While other goalkeepers his age were already building club careers, collecting trophies and attracting transfer fees, Vozinha was still finding his way, but he never stopped. He kept going, kept playing, kept representing his country, earning nearly 90 caps for the national team over 14 years, becoming the second highest caps earner in Cape Verde's history. And then the whistle blew in Atlanta. Spain came at Cape Verde exactly the way everyone expected. They controlled the ball, they built from the back, they moved with precision and confidence. Lamine Yamal, Pedri, Ferran Torres. The Spanish attack is not just technically gifted, it's relentless. When they sense weakness, they don't ease off. They go again and again until the goal comes. But the goal didn't come.
Spain hit 27 shots during the match. 27! That's not just a high number for a World Cup game. That's a statement of absolute dominance in terms of attacking intent. And yet, every time Spain lined up to shoot, every time the ball fizzed toward the Cape Verde goal, Vozinha was there. 7 saves directly on target. 7 moments where a shot that should have beaten a second-division goalkeeper, a 40-year-old whose contract had just expired, whose team had never played a World Cup match before, was stopped, pushed away, caught, tipped over the bar. One of those saves, a full-stretch dive to his right to deny what looked like a certain goal, drew gasps from inside the stadium and sent the internet into immediate meltdown. It wasn't just the quality of the save, it was the sight of this man, older than most international outfield players dare to play, moving with the reflexes of someone half his age, willing everything he had into keeping that ball out. Now, this is where things change. When the final whistle blew and the scoreboard confirmed what nobody had believed possible, a 0-0 draw against Spain, the world's second-ranked team, in Cape Verde's first ever World Cup match, Vozinha didn't run to the crowd. He didn't sprint around pitch. He stood in his penalty area and he wept. And what came out in the interview after the match is what turned this from a great footballing story into something that genuinely broke millions of hearts around the world. He said he cried because he was raised by his grandparents. They were everything to him, everything in his life, but they're not here anymore. They passed away a few years ago. He thought of them in that moment. He wished they could have seen it. And then he said something that cut even deeper. He cried because of his mother, too. She wasn't able to travel to Atlanta, not because she didn't want to be there, but because of a visa issue. The application process wasn't completed in time. The paperwork didn't go through. And so the woman who dreamed of seeing her son play for Cape Verde, the woman who watched him grind through years of second-division football in countries far from home, who waited 14 years for her son to reach the World Cup, missed the moment she'd waited for. Think about that. The entire world got to watch Vozinha save Spain. His mother didn't. But there's another angle to this story that tells you exactly who this man is. Even after explaining all of that, even with tears on his face and all of that emotion pouring out, what Vozinha said in that interview about his younger self is something that doesn't leave you easily. He said he would tell 18-year-old Vozinha to be really proud of himself. He said, "We work in life to have moments like this." He said, "I am 40 now, but I was not a professional until I was 25. This is a reward for all this journey." That's not the language of someone who got lucky. That's the language of someone who spent 2 decades quietly earning something the world never thought to offer him. The internet responded the way it only does when something genuinely extraordinary happens. Vozinha went into that match with around 45,000 followers on Instagram. By the time he woke up the next morning, he had over 7 million, and in the hours that followed, that number kept climbing, surging past 9 million, then 10 million, then higher. Brazilian broadcaster Cazé TV and Portuguese broadcaster Live Mode TV both gave the story massive coverage, launching a campaign to help Vozinha reach 1 million followers to celebrate his performance. They got there within hours, and the number kept going long after the campaign had served its purpose.
14 million followers for a 40-year-old second-division goalkeeper from Cape Verde. Because football, when it decides to make someone a story, doesn't do it halfway. And what this moment reveals about this World Cup matters beyond just the individual headline. This is exactly the argument for expansion that FIFA has been making since the decision was taken to go to 48 teams. Cape Verde would not be at this tournament under the old 32-team format. Vozinha would have retired quietly in a second-division Portuguese city without ever playing a World Cup match. His mother would have had nothing to miss. Instead, a nation of 525,000 people held Spain to a goalless draw. A 40-year-old goalkeeper with an expired contract won Player of the Match at the World Cup. A woman in Cape Verde watched her son do something that nobody from her country had ever done before, even if she had to watch it from home. And just days after UEFA's president was reported to have described some matches in this expanded tournament as completely uninteresting, this happened. Cape Verde versus Spain ended 0-0. And it generated more emotion, more global conversation, and more genuine connection to the sport than most football matches manage in a lifetime. The player impact here can't be measured in statistics alone, even though the statistics are staggering. 7 saves from 27 shots, and expected goals conceded of 2.29. A clean sheet that gave his nation a point that keeps them firmly in contention for the knockout rounds in Group H. Cape Verde only need a win against Uruguay or Saudi Arabia to push themselves into the round of 32, a thought that would have seemed delusional before June 15th. For Spain, the result is a jolt, not a crisis, but a reminder, the kind of match that forces a team to look at itself carefully before the next game.
When you hit 27 shots and don't score, the conversation shifts quickly from tactical analysis to psychological recalibration. Spain's players are good enough to move past it, but this result goes into the record books and it becomes part of the story of this tournament, regardless of what happens next. For Cape Verde, the point feels like a trophy. Their supporters, spread across the islands and across their diaspora in Portugal, the Netherlands, and beyond, experienced something they will describe to their children and grandchildren. Their country, their flag, their shirt on the same pitch as Spain at the World Cup. And not just on the same pitch, standing toe-to-toe, conceding nothing, earning a draw on merit with their goalkeeper named player of the match. Where does this go from here? Cape Verde face Uruguay next on June 21st in Miami Gardens. Uruguay is a different kind of challenge from Spain, more physical, more direct, with a proud World Cup tradition and a squad that contains genuine quality. Vozinha will need to be extraordinary again to keep another clean sheet, but nobody who watched what happened in Atlanta would rule it out. And the bigger picture question hanging over this story is whether Vozinha's mother finds a way to Atlanta or Miami or wherever Cape Verde play next. Because if there's a subplot to this tournament that deserves a happy ending, it's the woman who missed the most important night of her son's career because of a piece of paperwork. The world knows who Vozinha is now. 14 million people followed him. Broadcasters across the globe replayed his saves. Fans who had never heard of Cape Verde a week ago are now checking the Group H standings and looking up the islands on a map. This is what the World Cup is for. Not just the final, not just the established nations, not just the superstars who were famous before the tournament began. It's for the 40-year-old goalkeeper from São Vicente, who didn't turn professional until he was 25, who played in Moldova and Cyprus and Slovakia and Portugal's second division, who was raised by grandparents who aren't here to see this, and whose mother watched from home because the visa application didn't go through in time. It's for Vozinha. What do you think? Is this the best individual story of the 2026 World Cup so far? And can Cape Verde do something even more extraordinary against Uruguay on June 21st? Let us know in the comments, and if this story moved you the way it moved millions of people around the world, consider liking and subscribing so you don't miss what comes next.